Hi everyone, as Jim had introduced, my name is Juanita, Digital Creative Director for Iconic Collective, and I am super excited to be kicking off the first of our Masterclass series. I'm also quite excited to share this deck that I put together with you guys and to see if there's any ways we can help and support your businesses and your design teams crossover from being primarily print-based and just upskilling within the digital departments. And I hope you guys find this useful. So the point of creating graphic designs for digital content is not only to tell a story, but to attract the audience and generate engagement. So your socials, your website, your e-commerce platforms. In addition to building your audience online, the point of having it online is to drive feet into stores and build your brand recognition. Cool. So just to put your mind in the right space, everyone's been scrolling through social media quite a lot lately, especially with us being at home and in lockdown. And when you're scrolling through your socials, what is the last thing that you can remember that caught your attention and what made it memorable? Why was it memorable? Not really talking to your adorable cat memes or any of those type of content, but content that comes from a brand. As a digital designer, what you want to do is to create content that doesn't just stand out visually, but is memorable, that people go, oh, I saw this brand posted something, it was really cool. People don't really scroll through and read long paragraphs anymore. The attention spans on digital platforms these days are super short. Like there's so much content, you just keep scrolling till something catches your eye. And the aim, what we try to achieve, is to find the right balance between something that just stands out, that's memorable, and forces the users to basically stop their scroll and pay attention. Cool. So now I'm just going to break down the difference between your traditional graphic designer and a digital designer. Both of these are quite entwined. A lot of digital designers stem from graphic design. So breaking down graphic design, graphic designers create visual concepts to communicate their ideas and to inspire and inform their consumers. Typically what graphic designers work on in like summary, there's a really big list of things, but typical things are advertisements, magazine, double page spreads and all of those things, corporate reports, flyers and brochures, and just, a whole load more. A good graphic designer is able to take content and make it look really good for print. You're working typically within your CMYK space and you're setting things up for print, crop marks, all of those things. That's all knowledge of a typical graphic designer. Then when you move over into the digital space, obviously digital designers, their focus is now on social media, on banners, emailers, sometimes even animation. It's really good for digital designers to stay up to date with current digital design specs. Those things change every 3 to 6 months. Like all of the social platforms, they're constantly evolving and getting better as our phones and laptops and everything gets better. So those specs are ever evolving. So you have to stay up to date with that. Cool. Also, just a breakdown on which Adobe platform is best to use for what. A lot of designers feel comfortable in certain platforms and then they'll stick within that platform, which may not necessarily be the right platform for what they're working on. In your digital design space, Photoshop, you want to be using that for most of the things that you're working on. So a few examples would be creating social content, designing the front end of a website, retouching image adjustments, basically anything and everything for digital. And then for print in Photoshop, it's best practice to use that for image retouching, any form of image adjustments, and sometimes design work. For Illustrator, the only time digital designers should mostly be using Illustrator is when you're creating vector artwork. And then if you are working in an RGB space, Illustrator is fine. And then for print, your vectors are worked in Illustrator as well as general design work, and it's really good for print preparation. InDesign for digital, the only time you should be touching InDesign for digital is if you're working with interactive PDFs or EPUBs. And then for print, InDesign is king. You use it for layout, general design, and as well print preparation. And then the last three over there is really very much in the print, the digital space. So you use After Effects for all of your motion graphics and basically making everything move. Then Media Encoder is basically After Effects' best friend. It's the best thing to render your motion out of. And then XD does form a little bit more into the UX UI space. But in terms of social, you can also create your carousel ads or anything in there. It's quite nice to use for layout. Sweet. And then the next few slides, I'm just going to break down some basics in terms of design and how to apply your knowledge from being a normal, everyday graphic designer and how to cross that into the digital space. Cool. So when you get a digital design brief, as with any actual design brief, you need to find the why. Like, what is your purpose for this specific post or banner or anything? Your why is going to drive to what you create. So you need to ask yourself, is this post to drive sales? Is it to increase website traffic, increase brand awareness, increase engagement? Any of those posts, like they could be competition posts, product and price posts, you need to know the why, because we're working in such a tiny little space. Generally, like if you're working on a normal post, it's your 1080. You don't have a lot of space to work with. So finding that why and sticking to one why is more than enough. You don't want to overpopulate your post and make it look busy. Cool. Then working within color. Color is really, really, really important because it helps set the mood and create an atmosphere for your artwork. And also, as a designer, most of the color choices you have is often dictated by the client's brand CI, but it's also really, really good to keep in mind what contrasts you choose. Within RGB, your color contrasts are a lot brighter and you've got a much wider spectrum to work with versus print. You also need to keep in mind that people are looking at your artwork from different devices. They might have a really old phone or a super awesome Retina phone, so you have to keep in mind the brightness contrasts. So if you check to the right of my screen, you'll see that the black on the yellow looks really, really great, but the really bottom one, I think that's called vibration, where that green just does not work on the red, and you can feel like if you look at it too long, your eyes kind of vibrate, and that's obviously a no-go. Okay, cool. Moving on to using typography within your artwork. To keep in mind, like you have to kind of find a right balance of what's too much and what's too little. Something that I will be touching on a little bit later is the 80-20 rule. Most paid ads, they've got a limit of how much on-image copy you're allowed on your posts. But if it's not boosted, you obviously can use a lot more. Another thing to keep in mind is that most people are looking at socials on their phones. So you obviously don't want your font sizes to go too small. Like if you check the image on the bottom left, the girl with the yellow background, that font size is quite small, especially when viewed on a mobile. So you kind of need to see, am I using this typography as a texture or as a design element, or is it something that I actually want the people to read? And then you just need to go about it the right way. Like this Cyber Monday, there's a lot of type, but it's still well balanced and nice and clean. Then that is a good segue into working with space. If you haven't heard by now, negative space, often referred to as white space, it's a real thing. It works really well, and it helps draw attention to what you want the users to look at. Like that black post on the right, your eyes immediately goes to the words because you've got a lot of empty space around it, kind of pointing you towards it. It's really, really good to help create breathing room and make elements stand out. And then, yeah, just attracts the reader and gives them more attention. Another thing to keep in mind, especially when working across platforms for your brands, is consistency. The screenshots I've placed over here for Samsung is from their Twitter feed as well as their Instagram feed. You can see that it's the same campaign and there's a good consistency throughout. So no matter which platform your viewers are on, they know that, oh, like I saw this on Facebook, it's a strong draw to the same campaign. And then the whys for this is it helps give people a chance to quickly recognize your brand and know that this is your style, this is your tone. It helps keep all of your designs cohesive across all platforms. And then also people start to get to know, like, oh, this certain look and feel that reminds me of this brand. Even if it's not the brand, you'll see, like, you'll start recognizing their styles. Okay, cool. So next bit is, it is really, really important as a designer, no matter what type of designer you are, to stay up to date with the current trends. And not just to stay up to date with what's happening now, but it's really, really good to keep pushing, like, okay, cool, this is what's happening now, but how can I push this further and make it better and build on top of it? And it also just helps keeping your clients current and with what's happening. Some fun bits to do when you're stuck designing a post and you don't really know how to push it a little bit further is to add color, make it bigger, make it smaller, play a little bit, like see what it looks like and see what starts grabbing your attention. As I've said, do research, see what people are doing online, check Behance, check Dribble, check anywhere, like, you know, learn from what other people are doing. You obviously don't want to copy exactly what they do, but just push it further, like, yeah. And then often a nice trick that I love using is interaction between shapes, fonts, and images. So in the middle of the screenshots, yeah, there's a girl, I think that's a pair of Havaianas. Part of the image goes underneath the product, which is really lovely. And then on the graphic design trends post at the top, having that like 2020, like interact with those elements, like that's always a fun thing to try to do. And then also adding in textures, color overlays, iconography. And then on Instagram, our carousel ads often, if you scroll, it looks like they're linked. So it's quite fun to break up carousels so it goes over a series of posts. And then lastly, everyone loves a good piece of motion graphic or a GIF. Then working with logo use, different brands have different rules. So some brands really do want their logo on every single piece of artwork. And then there's other brands that don't. When you are working with a brand that would like their logo on their artwork, there's a few things to keep in mind. As you can see at the top here, this car brand, they've got a rule, it seems, that they place their logo either top at the middle, bottom at the middle, or at the bottom right. Obviously, depending on how the artwork sits. It's really good to keep where you place your logo quite consistent, else you're going to have a very busy feed with a logo jumping around everywhere. It's really good to keep in mind what color your logo is going to sit on and making sure that there's a good contrast between the background and your logo. And then if the logo is going on a background color that simply just does not work, see if the brand has a black or white logo that you can replace it with. And then also just make sure that the logo is not too big to overpower the design, but not too small that you can't read it. And then for the cleaner approach, where brands don't have logos, often, like you can see on the Aldo screenshots, your company logo is always going to be placed with the post that gets posted. So you automatically have a branded post with that logo side by side it. And then often also using products in the design. So if you're working with this Aldo box, your logo's on screen already. Next up is call to actions. call to actions are really, really important. It basically tells the user what they need to do and encourages them to share, like creating any form of interaction. And most of the time, it's going to click you through to a website or a different online application or something. I've made a list here of common call to actions that people use, which is your straightforward buy now, shop now, here's a sale, click here, a new something. Call to action can be basically anything. It's just really good to keep it nice and short and make sure that that call to action stands out. Cool. Moving into something a little bit more theoretical, visual hierarchy. Visual hierarchy is basically one of the places where designers feel like magicians. It's smoke and mirrors and directing people to where we want them to look. Okay, cool. So in most cultures, well, all cultures actually, people read from the top down, and then most cultures, people are reading from left to right. So we already know that flow that people read. There's a lot of studies that's been done to show that people scan the page, so basically spot read, and then they stop at points of interest. And there is technology out there that does kind of like a heat mapping thing to show where people are looking on the screen and what they're looking at. There's studies done that show that these patterns that people are looking at normally creates the shape of an F or a Z. Okay, cool. So let's go into F patterns. So this pattern is mostly used for your traditional text-heavy pages, so articles, emailers, blog posts, anything where there's a fair amount of copy. What people do is they scan from the left side of the page, and then they start looking for those keywords or images to grab their attention. Most people, when they're reading, they just go, go, go. So they'll spot read, see what they want, and if there's nothing interesting in that sentence, they'll work their way down the page, and this typically forms the shape of an F. And we can utilize this by putting your most important information at the top left, and then make other bits and pieces that you find important, make the words bold, underline them, put a block behind it, and then break up your paragraphs, like use that space to just group things. Okay, cool. Z patterns. Z patterns is mostly applied to like adverts or websites. Most people, like we've all grown up as the internet started or grown up alongside the internet. So web design way back, there was a typical pattern where people would place things, where things would be. So typically you place your logo at the top left, your navigation bar goes to the top right. At the bottom left, there would be your contact information, store finder, any of those type of goodies. And then normally in your bottom right is your sign up for emailers or any other call to action. So people are kind of trained in a way when they get to a website, this is where they expect things to be. And it also, if you check the little image on the screen, you'll see it creates that Z form. Another thing with visual hierarchy is that size matters. This image on the top left is probably the best thing to explain it. Like if you read the words on the screen there, you're going to read that big black title on the white background that's got a great contrast. You're going to read that first. Then below it, you're going to read the next thing. And then you'll spot there's copy at the top left. You'll be like, oh yeah, copy over there. What do you say? So you can see, like, by ordering it from biggest font to smallest font, it really does guide the person in where their eye's looking. Another thing where you can add some hierarchy to your artwork is by using space and texture. Apple is a really, really good example with this. They work with a lot of clean space. And depending whether you're more typography based or more visual, your eye's either going to go to that very textury phone or it's going to go to the words. But either way, Apple's got you to look where they want you to look. And then I think this might be the last one for visual hierarchy is color and tint. It's quite a no-brainer. Your color is going to look to, your eyes are going to look to where the color is. So it's quite important to the bits and pieces that you want to stand out, give it a little bit of color, give it a little bit of shape. And then the parts that you want people to look at second or last, make them a little bit darker or a bit more in the background. Great. Okay. So this is where I'm going to dive a little bit more into social media and what works on each platform. So Facebook is typically at the moment geared towards your older generation, people that kind of grew up with social media. Pretty much every single piece of content you produce for Facebook needs to be mobile optimized, that it will work on both a desktop and a mobile. I'll explain that in a little bit later, as well as the 80-20 rule. And then another thing to keep in mind is that your profile pictures are going to be in a circular cutoff. You're going to upload a 1080 square, but before you export it and give it over to your clients or your media teams, you need to make sure that, especially if it's a brand logo, it's not going to get cropped off in the corners. Always test it on a circle. And then the audience's attention spans, as we know, are quite short. You need to make sure that you grab the reader within your first 5 seconds. Otherwise, they're just going to scroll past. Longer video content is recommended and encouraged, but you still want to grab that person at the very, very beginning to make sure that they stay and they watch the whole video. Cool. Let's dive into the 80-20 rule. This thing has been around for quite a few years, and it's also evolved within the past few years. So as it is right now, the Facebook 80-20 rule applies to anything that's been boosted or has put media behind it. Facebook wants your visual to have 20% text and 80% imagery. There's a really cool online tool that Facebook has developed where you can test if your image will run. I've added the link at the bottom there, but basically if you just Google Facebook 80-20, it's the first thing that comes up. They've done great SEO. So what you do is you upload your image there and you press test it. And then the image you want to get is this green OK little circle. That's the best one that's going to tell you that your ad's going to run well. It's going to go out to everyone you want to see. And also for the designers, your little 6 blocks that you work with over here. So this is the grid that you want to work to. 20% of that grid is highlighted there in red. You don't need to have those 6 blocks in exactly the same space anymore. You are allowed to move them out. So this image over here, the type at the top, that will take up 3 blocks. Below it will take up 3 blocks, and then one of those blocks is going to move over and sit over that go. So that image will run totally fine. Your images that come up as low will still run okay, but it might just not have the same reach as your okay one will. And then obviously as you move down to medium and high, you've got less and less chance of the whole audience seeing that post. Then to break down what counts as text and what doesn't. The column on the left is what doesn't count as text. This is what you're aiming for. These are the happy ones. So if you have book or album covers, if there's typography on them, don't worry about it. Facebook doesn't count that anymore as text. If you've got product images, if the product is super zoomed in, it's going to count as text, but if it's zoomed out, it won't count as text. Any legal copy, it's a bit of a 50-50. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. So it's best to rather keep that in your supporting copy. If you've got app screen mockups, they should be fine. And then for some reason, I have no idea why, but often calligraphy gets approved. Facebook doesn't read that as copy. And then the parts that do count is numbers and text-based logos. So here's a good example where You can have your client's logo as the profile picture, but to rather have the focus on your call to action or what this boosted post is actually about, it's best not to put the logo on these ads. And then breaking up into all of the different types of things you can create for Facebook. The recommended upload size for a profile picture is 180 by 180. But for me, I found if you upload a 1080 by 1080, it's not much bigger. That is the size of your wall post. And what's quite nice about uploading it at that size is often, well, not often, all the time, your profile picture gets saved into your gallery. And when people click on it there, it's still going to display a 1080 by 1080. So if you upload a 180, it's much smaller and quite often will pixelate. Then your cover photo size. In the next slide, I will break down what it means to work with a mobile optimized cover photo. And then the ones over here that you want to check your 80-20 rule is your link ad images, your typical posts. Those may, if you're going to put any media behind it, you will need to check 80-20 on that. Otherwise, it'll be fine. Everything else on this list that doesn't have a 80-20 in brackets next to it, you don't need to worry about 80-20, like cover photos, your stories, all of those are fine. Cool. Going into cover images. So most people, as I've said, view Facebook on their phones. When you're designing a cover photo for Facebook, your 820 pixels, your full size, is going to show on your laptops, but then 640 of that is going to show on mobile. So the sides over there is going to get cropped in. It's really important to keep your important information in the middle. So any call to actions, the nice parts of your artwork, keep that more in the center of your artwork. Everything else on the sides, when people are on mobile, they're not going to see it. Cool. Moving on to Instagram. Instagram at the moment is geared towards millennials. It is the application that was built upon lunch and selfies. Again, over here, your audience attention spans are quite short, so make your images punchy. Instagram also, I think it was about 2 years ago, launched IGTV. That's where you're going to put your longer videos. They still appear on your Instagram feed, which is quite nice. As with most social platforms, your profile picture is going to be circular. And then there's also this new thing that Instagram's launching soon called Reels. And it's very similar to what is happening on TikTok. And that will be something fun to play with. And it should be rolling out globally quite soon. So breaking down the different types of formats for Instagram, as you can see, it's a lot less than Facebook. Your profile picture, yeah, is 180 by 180, and this one, no one can click on it and make it bigger, so you can upload that one that small. Then there's a new thing that Instagram's been doing for I'd say about the past 6 to 8 months, where you can post tall portrait posts and landscape posts. What happens over here is on your actual brand feed, it will still display in a square aspect ratio, but when the user clicks on it, it will enlarge and show either the full portrait post or landscape post. So it's also good over here. So when you upload it and click it to a specific frame to show, to make sure that entire frame looks good in a square. Cool. Moving on to Twitter. Twitter is the more conversational platform. Everything moves a lot faster on Twitter. So it's really, really important, yeah, to definitely grab your reader's attention. It is the application that is great for engagement. It's got a lot of celebrities talking on it. You also have your circular profile picture here to keep in mind. And then the last one you guys can read, I often add a little bit of quirky, awkward humor into the stuff I do. Cool. Moving on to the image types. As you can see over here, your header image, unlike Facebook, the profile picture still covers things on it. So you can see what's happened here is the actual cover image is covered by the circle of the profile picture. So when you're designing, make sure that you're keeping most of your content centered and everything that could be blocked by the profile picture isn't. Then moving on to LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the more business-focused platform. It is where people are sharing their thoughts and sometimes weird things, sometimes cool things, but it is the more serious out of the platforms. It's a great place to connect with people. Most people are on here for business-related things, so it's quite valuable when you're uploading things that it looks good and clean and nice and professional. Also, again, circular profile picture. And then here is a breakdown of the different image types you can be working with over here. What's quite interesting is if you work with a normal LinkedIn page versus a company LinkedIn page, your profile picture size differs as well as your header. And then on company profiles, you've got something called a hero picture. That will only display on the life tab of the company if the company has a life tab, and that's normally used for recruitment and HR reasons. Then on YouTube, YouTube, everyone knows it is all about the videos. But as a designer for YouTube, you need to remember that there's also the profile, the previews that people see. Those are the things that makes people click and actually watch the video. Unless you're on there, just you want to know, exactly which video you're going to look at. If you're just scrolling through the feed on YouTube, those previews are very, very important, and it will either make someone click or not click. And you want them to click. You want those views. On YouTube, your profile picture is a little bit bigger. On an actual brand's page, it does display quite small, as you can see with a screenshot on the top. But in the feed, if you just say for New Balance, if you go and search for New Balance in the search bar, when it comes up at first, it's going to come up like the screenshot at the bottom where it is displayed at the full 800 by 800 aspect ratio. And then, yeah, your thumbnails are the ones, as you can see in the top screenshots, that's the one that you want to grab your user's attention with. Then Snapchat. Snapchat's not really a platform that's gone like super big in South Africa as it's gone overseas. It is the profile with a lot of video content. Snapchat's actually got quite a bit of rules around what you can share and what you can't share. You're restricted from sharing silent videos or silent ads. You can't put any overly complicated URLs, so shortening your URLs over here is your best friend. You can't have call to actions, and you're not allowed to ask people to take screenshots because it's the application where once your video is played, it's gone. Then it's also got quite a bit of image types, and they're also quite sticky with your size of your files. Cool. These are just a whole bunch of different specs. They also often change quite a lot, so it's always good just to every, like say, month or two, do a little Google before you're designing for your clients, and make sure that you're still doing the aspect ratios correct and the file sizes correct. Then TikTok. TikTok is the new app that's grabbing everyone's attention. TikTok videos are usually quite short, and you want to make sure you don't add too many captions or call to actions or anything to your videos. Your main focus of TikTok is about videos, so don't distract from that. It's quite fun on here. Like if you do want to add text or something, add it as an overlay, make it fun and interactive with your videos. And then TikTok also has circular profile pictures. Oh, there was something cool in Snapchat I thought I should share. Snapchat doesn't have profile pictures. You used to be able to upload your profile picture in the shape of that little Snapchat ghost, but they've done away with that now. So the only place where you get your profile picture on Snapchat is, well, not profile picture, your name. It's just in the writing at the top. Cool. And then on TikTok, sorry, that was a jump back and forth. And then on TikTok, you upload your profile picture at a 400 by 400. That also doesn't go any bigger, so it's safe to upload it at that aspect ratio. Your videos will be in the same portrait size as it is with Instagram and with Facebook, so it's your 1080 by 1920. They do have a file size restriction, so make sure that your videos are under that recommended amount. And then they've got 3 different aspect ratios for their actual ads that you can upload, as well as file size restrictions to that. So just keep in mind when you're adding a lot of elements and graphics to it, that every single element you add to your video is going to bump up your video's file size. Cool, and that is all of the social platforms wrapped up. Next up is talking about emailers and GDN banners. So GDN banners, if you guys don't know what GDN stands for, it is your Google Display Network advertising banners. These are basically the ones, if you're on, say, Media 24, these are the little ads that you'll see on the side or the top of your screen. They're a really, really great tool that you can use to get brand recognition for your brand. How it works is people bid for certain keywords, and then these ads will obviously, how often that keyword's used, your ad will display in that place. The most commonly used banners is your 320 by 100, 300 by 250, 300 by 600, 338 by 180, and 728 by 90. Those are the ones that's used almost everywhere. I have put a screenshot here on the right of quite a few other ones that's quite common, but there is so many different sizes for GDN banners. They're quite something to work with. What's important to notice with GDN banners is they've got quite specific file size restrictions. No GDN banner can be over 150 kilobytes. But each GDN banner, when you get sent a list of media banners that you need to work on, they'll each have their own file size that they need to stick to. Like your tinies, I think they can't be something more than like 30 something kilobytes, like they're tiny. Things to take, kind of keep in mind here is you want to limit your amount of text and logos. It is quite a small space. So when you're working on it, the tiny ones, it's good to do a GIF on these so you can get the same amount of messaging across on the small ones as you have with the bigger ones. Your 300 by 600 over here, for example, this is enough space to hold your brand's logo, put a call to action, have a nice background, and still get the message across. Whereas if you had to take all of those elements and move it into one of the tinier ones, say this 200 by 200, you should create rather a frame animation GIF where you put your call to actions, your brand messaging, your imagery, and your logos all on separate frames. With that also, Google has a restriction where you need to have your client logo on the last frame, and you have to have a call to action. The Google rules also, like with social media, they change quite often as Google keeps updating. So it's also really, really important to keep on top of what's the latest information for these. Okay, next up is emailers. Emailers are quite critical when building brand recognition, getting messages across. I've made quite a little list here of do's and don'ts when designing email campaigns. So just to keep your code team happy, stick with web safe fonts. If you're going to use a font that's not web safe, you're going to need to expand that type and make it an image. Code team can't code fonts that's not web safe. Then it's also quite good to keep in mind keeping your artwork mobile optimized, so save it at 72 dpi. A lot of people are looking at emails either on their phones or on their laptops, and especially when they're on their phones, we don't want to kill people's data by putting images in there that's just unnecessarily too big. You really, really do want your call to actions to stand out. So if you look at the image on the left, the black and white buy now button, if that white button wasn't there and you just had white copy on a black background, your eye wouldn't immediately go there. And that's not what you want. You want people to click on your call to actions. That is ultimately the purpose of your emailer. It's also quite important to use your visual hierarchy over here. So prioritize your most important information above the fold. What above the fold means is if you're on your email and you've got your mail open on the side, the bit of the image that shows before you start scrolling, that is your above the fold section. And then also what's quite fun is to bold certain words, make certain words a different color, just so that people can spot read and go, cool, this is an emailer I really want to get into. And then on the don't list, keep your artwork quite simple, quite clean. Don't use a lot of copy. Don't put too much navigation in your header and footer. Keep it nice and clean and simple. Don't put images behind your call to actions. You want your buttons to look like buttons. And then it's not recommended to make your body copy a color text. Just because there's dark mode and light mode on people's phones and laptops, and you're not entirely sure which one they're using and what their contrasts are going to be like. So if you do want to put color on copy, the most appropriate way is to do it like the screenshot where they've made certain keywords a color just to make them stand out. Okay, getting back into layout. So yeah, layout's really, really important. This is where you're going to bring in the learnings from visual hierarchy. You're going to make images stand out, make headlines stand out, bold your keywords so people can spot read and see the bits and pieces that they need to see in order to stick on your emailer and read the whole thing. You can break up blocks of content by using your space. This is one of the more common grids that designers use for emailers. It's quite a nice way of making your content look really visually appealing, but still getting the message across. And it's really, really nice for when you've got an emailer with a lot of copy, just to make that copy bounce from left to right. Yeah, it's just one of the nicer, prettier go-tos for a designer. Then one that is extremely common, and I'm sure we've all gotten an email with this exact layout. The reason why it's so common is that it really, really works. And in terms of your visual hierarchy, it literally points the person straight to your call to action. So you've got your big image header at the top, a call out of a heading, and a little bit of copy going, this is what the email is about. Click on the button and go to where you need to go. Then I've created a bit of a checklist when designing emailers. First with it is obviously deciding what layout you're going to use. Because emailers, when you're designing them, it's basically like building a puzzle, like finding exactly what is the right layout, the right way to show off the content you've been given. So I always recommend starting with a scamp, like split up your content into different sections, group it. So you've got, okay, cool, this is my intro bit. This is the bit that's going to talk about product and price. So just scamp out how you're going to break up those sections and kind of what your layout's going to look like. Obviously, use space to divide those sections. Also, for anyone that's worked with me, I am extremely OCD about spacing, and making your emailers like perfectly spaced out, it really, really elevates it and makes it look so much better. So make sure that your space in between your content blocks are even. And also then make sure that your readers know what the important information is. So the bolding, the call to actions, all of those things apply, yeah. And then don't make your emailers more than 3 columns. Even 3 columns are a bit of a push. You want to stick to either a 1-column layout or a 2-column layout. This is because, again, mobile optimization, 3 columns on a tiny phone screen just won't work. And on a laptop, it might look okay. Then the dimensions you want to stick to when designing an emailer. Most emailers are displayed between 600 and 640 pixels wide, but when you work, when your reader is viewing it on a retina display, it's going to push that emailer width double. So when you're designing an emailer, rather work within a 1200 wide artboard, and then what will happen on the smaller screens, it's just going to auto resize. When you're working with imagery, you need to make sure that your imagery is relevant to the content that you're working on. I know that sounds like a bit of a basic, but it's very important. Make sure that your images are optimized for quick loading times. A nice thing to do is upload SVGs where possible. The file size of a SVG is a lot smaller than a JPEG or a PNG. So that's a really, really nice way of keeping your file size of your emailer down. And then our breathing room, the white space, those are very important, as I mentioned right just before. And then also it's good practice for your call to actions to have about a 20 pixel padding all the way around, just to help them stand out. And then the mobile optimization, I've spoken to that. And then also it's really, really important to make sure that your body copy or any copy used on your emailer is legible, especially when viewed on a mobile platform. And then lastly, with your footer, most footers are designed, most footers are dictated by client CI. They may or may not already have a footer created. But when you do create a footer, it's quite important to add your social networks in there. For a lot of people that are visual, I love getting an emailer that's got a social network links at the bottom, because if the emailer was pretty, I really want to see what they're doing on social. So I'll click and follow through straight away. Then at the bottom, it's also really important to add in your legal copies. So a reminder of why people are getting this email. A lot of people subscribe to emails and then they forget they have. And it's really good to go, you're getting this email because you just subscribe from this place. It's just a nice way to make sure people don't unsubscribe just because they're forgetful. Then again, you need to also include an unsubscribe link. People get really frustrated if they do get an email and they can't unsubscribe. And then all of your support links and everything at the bottom. So where to find us, any of those things. All of that is really, really good to keep in the bottom of your emailer. And that is it. Digital design in a nutshell. Done.